Okay, a lot of times, most of the time, when clients contact me, they want to know if I were forced to file for bankruptcy, what type of assets do I own that would be protected and which of my assets would not be protected? Very simply, what they're talking about are exemptions or property that is exempt from the legal process. An exemption can either be a real property exemption or a personal property exemption. The difference is real property is real estate. You can exempt equity in a homestead. Personal property is everything that isn't a real estate or isn't real estate. For example, you can protect equity in tools of your trade. You can protect equity in motor vehicles or household goods and other miscellaneous tangible and intangible assets. Well, let's go back in history to talk about what these exemptions are and where they came from. Our law comes from English jurisprudence and the common law system. So if you go far enough back, probably somewhere in the early 1700s, if someone were to sue and get a judgment against me, they could come out to let's say they got a judgment for 12 pounds. They could come out to my hamlet and they could take my feed grains, my food supplies, they could take my furniture, my clothing. Everything was subject to legal execution. I imagine that somewhere along the line, Parliament got tired of seeing naked people. And so they said, okay, creditors, new rule. If you get a judgment against someone, you can't take their clothes. A few years later, they got tired of feeding the dependents of the debtor. And they said, okay, creditors, new rule. You can't take food, fuel, and provisions. A few years later, they realized that someone couldn't ply their trade without their tools of their trade. And so Parliament said, we're going to exempt from the legal process. If you get a judgment creditor, you cannot take tools of the debtor's trade. And so this is how the lists develop up. In Arizona, there's a list that you can get either from our offices or we have a copy of exempt assets on our website. If you have any questions about assets that you own, whether they're protected, whether they're not protected, whether a bankruptcy trustee could take them, if a creditor, a judgment creditor could take them from you, please schedule an appointment to meet with us in our office. Now, one last point on exemptable assets. Remember, it protects the equity that's in your property. So if you pledged an asset as collateral to a lender, you can't simply claim your vehicle exemption and keep the car. If our example is that we have a car that's worth $6,000 and a loan on the car that's $10,000, we've pledged that asset as collateral. We have no equity. We can't simply tell the creditor, well, you no longer have any legal rights. We're going to claim our $6,000 equity in the motor vehicle, and you can't come and take it. That's not the way exemptions work. Exemptions protect your equity. So the scenario would be if we had a car that were worth $6,000 and we owed nothing, then yes, we have $6,000 equity in a motor vehicle that under Arizona law currently, we could protect the entire $6,000 as exempt. If we are physically disabled or have a dependent that's physically disabled, we could claim an exemption in up to $12,000 equity in a motor vehicle. I'm not going to get into the specific details of all the exemptions, but suffice it to know that it's a reasonably complicated area, a lot more rules than what you will even see on the sheet of exemptions that we provide for our clients. Schedule up an appointment, discuss your financial situation with our offices, and we will advise you as to assets that would be exposed if you filed for bankruptcy, that would be exposed if a creditor got a judgment against you, whether you filed for bankruptcy or not, as opposed to those assets that you can protect in bankruptcy.